Steve Pearson, back once again from the West Virginia Independent Observer, observing its 5th anniversary.
Yes, indeed. Yeah,
congratulations.
We took it on in the spring of 2020 when previous owner had lost all the advertisers and it was about to go out of business. And we thought, well, let's keep this thing going. And it's turned into quite a thing for us after 5 years. And we've actually been, expanding it over the years. And it's was a monthly print. And we've just added a weekly email quick read newsletter to go out. We have several thousand subscribers on that already, and that's free, just like the paper. And so now we have both, and we got our website, and we rebranded that as observerwv.com. So we're a multimedia company now, all electronic and print. And personally, I like the print. That there's something about that getting out there and getting into people's households, and you don't have to find it. It finds you, and we've covered a lot of stories in the county, and that's really what we focus on is Jefferson County and the issues that really are affecting or could be affecting. We try to look forward, not with like speculating, but anticipating. And, we started studying like the industrial solar facilities. We started looking at in 2020, if you can imagine. That was 5 years ago. And looking at the housing growth that, nobody thought Jefferson County was going to grow after 10 years of being flat. And you could just, you start looking in the corners and you sort of see the lights and try to help people understand, is this a train or is this the sun coming up? And a lot of times it ends up being a train. And if you're not prepared for it, you get run over. And, so, with the latest, that sort of ties into what happened with the water bottling plant.
Yeah.
That timeline on that was just before Halloween, mid-October. We saw a legal notice in the Jefferson, the Spirit of Jefferson. And I put like a one paragraph like, hey, this is something that you might want to be aware about, and made sure that the paper got distributed down in Middleway. And a couple weeks later, the folks down there had organized that group, Stacy Chapman, I don't know whether she was on the radio. Yeah. Protect Middleway, totally new group that just got together in her living room after they made a few phone calls, and they got about 150 people to show up at the planning meeting in November. And you can see it's snowballed from there with the turnout. And that was only start to from where we are now. That was only 20 weeks, a little over 5 months. So
are you a news hound? And is that in your background, Steve? Were you a journalism major or anything like that in the past?
No, I was not. I did work for CBS magazines just out of college, but that was more in book and magazine publishing. I actually spent some time in Newport Beach working at Road and Track, driving cars. Shall we say a little bit too fast?
Hey, that's the dream dude job right there.
It was. It was a fantastic job because the perks came with a gas card and a whole rack of keys.
Oh my!
So the senior guys got to pick first, and then the young guys, the junior guys got whatever was left. And the weekend, you just take the keys. You had a company gas card. And the whole point was, as long as you wrote some notes about what the car was like, you could drive it anywhere.
What was the best car you drove?
Oh, we drove 911s and modified Corvettes, Ferraris, Lotuses, the things like the Bentleys and the Aston Martins. They wouldn't let us drive those kind of things. But
I was a valet when I was in high school and early college years. I was a valet at a country club. And you get to drive pretty much everything that's out there.
For about 100 yards.
Yes, for about 100. And you get to learn how to put them in reverse, too. And I got to drive a Rolls Royce, which was just amazing. Pretty much every other kind of car you can imagine, Jaguar XJ6s and 12s. And the domestic car, the smoothest ride and the sweetest operating was a Buick Riviera. Mm-hmm. I preferred it over the Eldorado, which was basically the same frame.
In those years, they sort of like everything was the same underneath and just different details.
But that was a sweet domestic ride there in terms of a luxury car. But so that's pretty cool. And let me just give you a big compliment too, because I think you might be among the preeminent newsmen in the Eastern Panhandle these days in terms of print people covering stories and whatever. you do as good a job as has been done, and you're really up on your stuff. I respect that.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, and that's the nature. That's the value of journalism, particularly local journalism. It's a beat. They call that. But and a beat, it's like it's like drumming. You got to practice it, and you got to understand it. And you can't just walk in and look into a room and say just report the facts, because well, what's behind those facts? What are the motivations? Who are the players? And you start to put the puzzle together, and it's really about storytelling, and you're trying to flesh out the story, kind of like what John does, and give people an understanding of what's going on.
Let's talk about that bottling plant,
Sure.
because there's been some news that has broken on that recently.
Well, as you probably are aware, but maybe not all the audience is aware. So they had a meeting last Tuesday. The Planning Commission. This was to review a concept plan for a water bottling plant, a 1 million square feet facility in 2 different buildings, and they got rejected. And they spent, I guess the meeting started at 7 o'clock, and the final vote came just before 3 o'clock in the morning the next day. And there were 500 people from the community that showed up. They had it at Washington High School. And by 2 o'clock in the morning, when they started, the Planning Commission actually, the comments had finished, and the Planning Commission was debating, there were still 100 people in the room. It was a very intense atmosphere. When it started out, there were some people chanting in the back and all that. And I thought, well, okay, this is just going to be a circus. But no, it turned out that there were about 126 people that got up and spoke. And the range of comments, sometimes you go to these meetings and it's just, I'm against X, or, you should do this because, and it's formulaic. Almost every person had a personal story about why they were concerned about this. And they weren't against it because they didn't want something there. They were just against it because of the uncertainty, the potential harms, the concerns that hadn't been addressed, and the effects that it could have on their lives, their livelihoods, their families' livelihoods. You had farmers that were coming in there, talking about how essential the water is, to their agricultural operations. And you had one of the ones that struck out with me was a younger woman. She said, "Well, I'll be back here in about 4 hours because I'm a student here, and I live here. I live on my work on my family farm, and I plan to go to college, but I'd like to be able to come back here, and continue, and farming in where I grew up. And if the water goes away, I won't be able to do that." And you had another student get up there and say, because there were a lot of folks, I've been farming, this is my grandfather's farm. I've been here for 6 generations. And she said, I want to come back here and I want to be the 10th generation, to farm my family's land. So it was a real sort of, visceral reaction in the room that, Jefferson County has a lot, and we should be supporting that and encouraging that. And we don't need to. We're concerned about trading it away, for this unknown and what is this going to do. And, the Planning Commission, I think, heard that. They could not hear that. So they took a long time to get to that point. And when it came time for the applicant to say, well, because they had the right to rebut anything that the audience said. Their representative said, no, we'll just wait for hear your questions. So the Planning Commission asked a few questions about the water, but then they started talking about the traffic, and they just decided that the traffic was a non-starter, and they voted, and it was unanimous.
What's Sidewinder's next option on this?
Well, you'll have to ask Sidewinder that, I think, because we could speculate, spend the whole morning speculating about what they're going to do. But I think, this is a business deal. I mean, they've been in here. They talked about that they're finance guys. They've talked about how much they've invested in this. They've talked.
How much have they invested, Steve?
Well, they say anywhere from 15 to 20 million. I mean, we know they've bought. They've at least 10 million with the land and what they've bought. But they said that they plan to invest 150 to 200 million to build this whole thing out. But I suspect they don't have that cash just sitting in a bank account or a CD. They have investors. So I think it's not just Sidewinder, but it's Sidewinder's investors. They get to decide. They started this. They're on their 4th year of doing this. They bought the property in April of 2020. And so I imagine in their capital stack, they've got a lot of different, types of investors. And they may even have debt in there. It depends. So it's up to their equity investors to decide, do we double down? Because, when you look at a pitch book for a deal like this, it typically talks about, well, here's the market opportunity, here's the competition, and you get that classic hockey stick where okay, over time your returns just go up, up, and up because your market share grows up. And all the risk factors are in a footnote, the couple of little stars, and they're at the back of this thing.
Steve,
this is now front and center, the risk for their investors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've over the last several weeks, we've talked about various elements of this bottling plant. One was the quality of water, quantity of the water, and the transportation. Was there a tipping point with the Planning Commission of these three?
No, because they actually got into discussion of how they might limit the water use. Where they would place the well. Different zones. If it fell below a certain zone, they would restrict the water, and then if it fell below another zone, you can't pump anymore. So they were addressing all of those questions.
Yeah.
It rolled into that, and they started going down that, but then they got to the traffic, and there were several. There was a technical report that the Jefferson County Foundation had provided to them. There was the Historic Landmarks Commission report on the village of Middleway is a Category 1 historic district.
And they were talking about 150 trucks a day rolling through there 24/7?
It wasn't clear if it was 24/7, but the number they said was about 150, 160, at peak. And again, that was not uniform. They were talking, I think the number was raised at some point, the peak hours, there would be 3 trucks, a truck every 3 minutes, so you're continuous.
Some of these 500 people that you said showed up, I'm going to assume probably a very few of those probably were in support of the bottling plant, if any.
Well, there were two gentlemen got up and spoke from the trades unions of West Virginia, and they spoke at the very beginning. And at about 120, we're up to about 120. So this was sometime around 2 o'clock in the morning. Commissioner Steve Stollifer got up and spoke in favor of it, and that was it.
Wow.
Spoke in favor?
Spoke in favor.
So he's probably the only local resident that spoke in favor of, correct?
As far as I know, and that's consistent with what I've been hearing around the county. I heard a lot of people with a lot of concerns. There were a lot of people who were not outright, I don't like this, it's a bad idea. They just had concerns, and we don't, we're not being addressed about this. But nobody was saying, oh, this is a slam dunk, absolute, just do it and we'll figure it out.
So the majority of the concerns you think would be more towards having water quality, or was it traffic?
It was both. The amount of water absent any sort of assurance that it wasn't going to affect wells in a general area, and more so because you go back to this karst topography, there wasn't any assurance that this wouldn't have a widespread effect because of the way the water gets pulled in this sort of network or matrix or whatever people like to call it, for how it gets drawn down, and then the traffic through the village.
Steve, was the application rejected as incomplete still, or was it rejected as in this is the final look at it and we're done with it?
This is the final look and we're done with it. The motion was it's a motion to reject based on specific references in the zoning ordinance. So 1.1, which was the purpose of the zoning, includes things like general welfare, environmentally sound development, and historic preservation. So it didn't support that aspect of it. For section .c, go ahead.
So this means the county commission will not have a say?
No, the county commission does not have any role in planning and zoning issues. That's why they set the planning commission up to deal with that. The other aspect that was cited in the motion to deny reject was 4.4.c, which is Any development which will destroy a historical character of a property listed in the West Virginia or National Register of Historic Places shall not be permitted. That's in the zoning ordinance.
Now, oh, go ahead. Finish.
And the Landmarks Commission, which is tasked with interpreting that, said, yeah, and this is the zoning ordinance, and they said, you could do this, but only if you have a 200-foot buffer around the village. So if you could go around the village, this wouldn't apply. But since you're going through with the traffic and a pipeline, you're talking about a mile-long pipeline directly through the middle of the village to connect the water and the plant. That was hard to get around that one, no pun intended. The other thing that was cited in the motion to reject was that in the zoning ordinance, if a use is not listed in a table, it's to be treated as if it's not permitted. So water extraction, and again, we can debate all day long, and the lawyers no doubt will, about what extraction means, but if they're taking more out from their property than would be going back in from their property,
it's extraction.
It's extraction. So there were three primary citations, and then just a general citation to the subdivision regulations, again, back to the purpose. So no, it was rejected. So if they would have to come in with a completely new plan at this point.
As legitimate as the concerns are for the citizens of Middleway and those surrounding the area who had concerns, this certainly doesn't help Jefferson County's business agenda when you add it up with the controversies of the past. And you're not even going back to Rockwell, but it continues to build as Jefferson as an anti-business county.
Well, that's an interesting point, because last week, or the week before this meeting, I was at a county commission meeting, and they gave a presentation. This is the county administrator was giving a presentation about the budget and the health of Jefferson County. And one of the slides she had was on new business formations in Jefferson County. And I don't want to say it's exponential, but it's increasing significantly. It's leading the state. And these are small businesses.
Which is more of what Jefferson County seems to want.
Seems to fit. I mean, we don't have I-81 here, which, Berkeley, you guys are blessed with that. I mean, it's a
blessed and cursed.
Right, but it is a infrastructure that allows you to, attract industry, attract, distribution, bigger businesses. Yeah. And when you talk to people who are in charge of economic development, access to transportation is a big. It's why industry, was around lakes, rivers, ports, railroad lines, because when you look at the cost of transportation, gas and trucking, that gets up there pretty quickly compared to the raw materials. When you look at what a farmer gets for the grain they put in the elevator, it's pennies compared to what the processors get to what the retail. So you add all this up, and so. I know obviously we had the Route 9 bypass that went in, a decade and a half ago or so, but, when you're coming to the Eastern Panhandle and you're looking at parcels and you look at, when the Berkeley Development Authority is pitching, I've got this parcel right here, it's right next to this interstate, and then the Jefferson County ones, we have this same size parcel, but it's 5 miles away. Okay.
Which one you're going to take?
Right, but they're... Back to the county commission and the presentation, they were really touting that they felt that the growth of smaller, mid-sized businesses is healthy.
Jefferson wants.
But it's actually happening in Jefferson County, and that was one of the points that was made during this protest. Is we already have industry, we already have a thriving tourism industry, and don't kill that, to do something that's speculative.
Besides tourism and Rockwall, what other new businesses have come into Jefferson County?
They didn't get into that detail. That's a story I'll be covering, because I had been aware of that, and it's easy to cover one big story, and now I've got to go out and cover several dozen small little businesses. But a business that opens up a let's say a large processing like a facility, have a couple senior managers, but then a lot of lower compensated workers, versus say a smaller like an engineering firm that's going to be hiring more on average higher wage people. If the more of those you have, they could be a lot more economically valuable than a single facility.
But I do not know of any one of these on either categories that have come into Jefferson County in the last few years. There may be some very tiny, small mom and pop businesses, but nothing of significance.
Steve, before we run out of time, I want to cover one other thing that you recently posted about, and that was Rockwool acquiring another 57 acres of land.
Yeah, I spoke with Paul Espinosa about that. The original deal was, they bought that whole parcel for $2.5 million, but their purchase agreement was only for the 100 acres or so that they used for the factory. So they gave that 58 acres back to Jefferson Orchards, and they said that they just felt that the economic conditions were right. They don't have any specific plans for it. They just wanted to acquire it, but they spent $3.5 million for it. But that's their. I guess the factory is successful. They said they are running 24/7. But again, I wrote what the number of employees that they had there. But again, if you have 10 businesses, each employing 15 people, you may not see them, but that's 150 employees versus one big business that's employing 150 people. So from a payroll and they're the same. They're just harder to see.
And if you have 10 businesses supplying 15, you're not dependent on one of those businesses staying in your community.
And that happens in a lot of communities. Yeah, so we'll be reporting on these things at observerwv.com. That's us.
Good to see you again, man. Thanks for coming in.
Take care.
Yeah.
Thanks, Steve.
When is the next monthly edition out, Steve?
Mid-April.
Mid-April. Very good. Steve Pearson from the West Virginia Independent Observer.